Maria Santos stood at the edge of the military training ground, watching other recruits practice their wall climbing exercises. Her left leg throbbed with a dull pain that had become her constant companion over the past 3 months. The injury happened during a routine training exercise when she fell from a rope climbing obstacle. The doctors said it was just a minor muscle tear, but Maria knew something was wrong. The pain was different from anything she had experienced before. The other recruits didn't understand. They saw her limping and assumed she was weak or making excuses. During morning drills, when Sergeant Rodriguez called for wall climbing practice, Maria would often have to sit out or attempt the exercise at a slower pace. This made her an easy target for ridicule from her fellow trainees. "Look at Santos again," whispered Private Jake Williams to his buddy Private Chen. "She's going to use her injury excuse to get out of training." The two men laughed quietly, but not quietly enough. Maria heard every word, and each comment felt like a knife cutting deeper into her confidence. Maria had dreamed of joining the military since she was 12 years old. Her father, Roberto Santos, had served in the army for 20 years before retiring as a master sergeant. He told her stories of courage, determination, and never giving up, even when things seemed impossible. Those stories shaped Maria's childhood and fueled her desire to follow in his footsteps. Growing up in a small town in Texas, Maria was always the athlete in her family. She played soccer, ran track, and even competed in rock climbing competitions during high school. Her coaches often praised her mental toughness and ability to push through physical challenges. When she graduated, joining the military seemed like the natural next step. Boot camp had been challenging but manageable until the injury occurred. Maria was participating in an obstacle course designed to test recruits' ability to navigate difficult terrain quickly and efficiently. The course included rope climbing, wall scaling, and crawling under barbed wire. Maria had completed similar courses dozens of times before without any problems. On that particular day, rain had made the ropes slippery. Maria was halfway up a 20-foot rope when her grip failed. She fell awkwardly, landing on her left leg in a way that sent shooting pain through her entire body. The medics examined her immediately and found no broken bones, but something definitely felt wrong. The military doctors performed several tests and x-rays, but everything appeared normal. They diagnosed her with a minor muscle strain and prescribed rest and physical therapy. Maria followed their instructions carefully, but the pain persisted. Sometimes it was a sharp stabbing sensation. Other times it felt like a burning fire spreading from her thigh down to her ankle. What frustrated Maria most was that she couldn't explain exactly what was wrong. The pain was real, but since the medical tests showed nothing serious, many people assumed she was exaggerating or looking for attention. Even some of the medical staff seemed skeptical when she described her symptoms. Sergeant Rodriguez was a tough, no-nonsense instructor who had been training recruits for 15 years. He had seen hundreds of young people come through his program, and he prided himself on being able to separate the strong from the weak. When Maria first started having problems with the wall climbing exercises, he gave her the benefit of the doubt, but as weeks passed and she continued to struggle, his patience began to wear thin. "Santos, you need to push through this," he told her after another failed attempt at the climbing wall. "Pain is temporary, but quitting is forever. Your fellow soldiers are going to depend on you someday. They can't afford to have someone who gives up when things get difficult." Maria understood his concern, but she also knew that something was seriously wrong with her leg. She had always been tough and never backed down from a challenge. This wasn't about mental weakness or fear. Her body was telling her that something needed to be fixed before she could perform at her best. The other recruits picked up on Sergeant Rodriguez's attitude toward Maria. If their tough instructor thought she was making excuses, then she must be. The comments and whispers became more frequent and more cruel. Some recruits would openly laugh when she struggled with exercises that she had once found easy. Private Williams was particularly harsh in his criticism. He came from a military family and believed that anyone who couldn't handle the physical demands of training had no business being a soldier. "My dad always said that the military isn't a place for people who can't handle pain," he told anyone who would listen. "Santos needs to either toughen up or find a different career." Maria's roommate, Private Lisa Chen, was one of the few people who showed her any sympathy. Lisa had injured her shoulder during training and understood how frustrating it could be when your body wasn't cooperating. She often helped Maria with stretches and exercises that might help reduce the pain. Don't listen to them, Lisa told Maria one evening as they prepared for bed. You're one of the strongest people I know. If you say something is wrong, then something is wrong. The doctors just need to look harder. Maria appreciated Lisa's support, but it didn't make the daily challenges any easier. Every morning, she would wake up hoping that the pain had disappeared overnight. Every morning, she was disappointed. The simple act of getting out of bed became a struggle that required careful planning and slow movements. During physical training sessions, Maria felt like she was fighting two battles simultaneously. She had to deal with the physical pain in her leg while also trying to ignore the psychological pain of constant ridicule from her peers. The combination was exhausting and demoralizing. One particularly difficult day, the recruits were practicing an obstacle course that included a 12-foot wall climb. This wall was designed to simulate the type of barriers that soldiers might encounter in combat situations. Recruits were expected to climb over the wall quickly and efficiently, using only their upper body strength and footwork. Maria watched as one recruit after another successfully completed the climb. When her turn came, she approached the wall with determination, but also with fear. She knew that her injured leg would make the climb much more difficult than it should be. She grabbed the top of the wall and tried to pull herself up while finding footholds with her feet. Her left leg immediately protested with sharp pain, but she pushed forward anyway. Halfway up, the pain became so intense that she couldn't continue. She had to drop back down to the ground, defeated once again. "That's pathetic," said Private Williams loudly enough for everyone to hear. "My little sister could climb that wall faster than Santos." Several other recruits laughed at his comment, making Maria feel even worse about her situation. Sergeant Rodriguez shook his head in disappointment. "Santos, I'm starting to wonder if you have what it takes to be a soldier. Maybe you should consider requesting a transfer to a non-combat position." Those words hit Maria harder than any physical pain she had experienced. Her dream of following in her father's footsteps as a combat soldier was being threatened by an injury that nobody seemed to understand or believe was real. That night, Maria called her father from the base phone. She had been avoiding telling him about her struggles because she didn't want him to worry or think less of her, but she had reached a point where she needed advice from someone who understood military life. "Dad, I'm having some problems here," she began, trying to keep her voice steady. She explained the injury, the failed medical tests, the constant pain, and the ridicule from other recruits. Roberto listened carefully without interrupting. When Maria finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Mija," he finally said, "I've seen a lot of soldiers in my time, and I've learned that the strongest ones aren't necessarily the ones who never fall down. They're the ones who get back up no matter how many times they're knocked down." "But what if I can't get back up this time?" Maria asked, feeling tears start to form in her eyes. "You can," her father said with conviction. "But sometimes getting back up means being smart about how you approach the problem. Maybe the doctors at your base aren't the right ones to help you. Maybe you need to be more persistent about getting answers. Don't let anyone convince you that what you're feeling isn't real." After talking to her father, Maria felt a renewed sense of determination. She decided that she wouldn't let this injury end her military career without a fight. She would find a way to get proper medical attention and prove to everyone, including herself, that she belonged in the military. The next morning brought another round of physical training, and Maria knew it would be another day of struggle and embarrassment. But she also knew that giving up wasn't an option. Somewhere deep inside, she found the strength to face another day of challenges, even though she had no idea that everything was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. The following week, Maria made a decision that would change everything. Instead of accepting the base doctor's diagnosis, she decided to seek a second opinion during her weekend leave. She had saved enough money to visit a sports medicine specialist in the nearby city, someone who might have more experience with the type of injury she was experiencing. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been treating athletes and active individuals for over 20 years. Her clinic specialized in diagnosing difficult cases where traditional medical approaches had failed to identify the problem. When Maria called to make an appointment, she explained her situation and the frustration she was feeling with the military medical system. "I see cases like yours more often than you might think," Dr. Mitchell told Maria during their phone conversation. "Sometimes injuries are more complex than they appear on standard tests. I'd like to do a more thorough examination and possibly some different types of imaging." Maria felt hopeful for the first time in months. Here was a doctor who didn't immediately dismiss her concerns or suggest that the pain was psychological. The appointment was scheduled for the following Saturday, which meant Maria would have to use her precious weekend leave time and spend her own money, but she knew it was worth the risk. Back at the base, the mockery continued. Private Williams had started calling her Limping Santos whenever the drill instructors weren't around. Other recruits would sometimes exaggerate limps when walking past her, thinking they were being funny. The constant humiliation was wearing down Maria's confidence, but she held on to the hope that Dr. Mitchell might have answers. During the week leading up to her appointment, Maria tried to document her pain more carefully. She kept a notebook where she recorded when the pain was worst, what activities triggered it, and how it felt throughout different times of the day. She noticed that certain movements caused sharp shooting pains, while others caused a deep, aching sensation. Lisa Chen continued to be supportive, but Maria could tell that even her friend was starting to have doubts. "Maybe the doctors are right," Lisa suggested one evening. "Maybe you just need more time to heal. Sometimes injuries take longer than we expect." Maria appreciated Lisa's concern, but she knew her own body. This wasn't normal healing pain. Something was wrong, and she was determined to find out what it was. Saturday morning arrived, and Maria took a bus to Dr. Mitchell's clinic. The facility was modern and well-equipped, very different from the basic medical facilities at the military base. When Dr. Mitchell came out to greet her, Maria immediately felt comfortable. The doctor was professional, but also warm and genuinely interested in understanding Maria's experience. "Tell me everything," Mitchell said as they settled into the examination room. "Start from the beginning and don't leave out any details, even if they seem unimportant." Maria described the fall, the initial examination, the ongoing pain, and the frustration of not being believed. Dr. Mitchell listened carefully, asking detailed questions about the pain patterns and requesting that Maria demonstrate which movements caused the most discomfort. The physical examination was more thorough than anything Maria had experienced at the base. Dr. Mitchell tested her range of motion, checked for subtle signs of nerve damage, and performed several specialized tests that the military doctors hadn't done. Even during this initial examination, Dr. Mitchell noticed things that suggested the injury was more complex than a simple muscle strain. "I want to do an MRI with some specific sequences that might show soft tissue damage that doesn't appear on regular X-rays," Dr. Mitchell explained. "I also want to do some nerve conduction studies to check if there might be any nerve involvement that was missed in your previous examinations." The MRI took about an hour, and Maria had to lie very still while the machine took detailed pictures of her leg. She had never had such an advanced test before, and she felt both nervous and excited about what it might reveal. When the results came back 2 hours later, Dr. Mitchell's expression was serious but also satisfied, like a detective who had finally solved a difficult case. "Maria, I have good news and challenging news. The good news is that we found the problem. The challenging news is that it's more complicated than anyone realized. The MRI showed that Maria had sustained damage to a small but important muscle deep in her thigh, and there was also some compression of a nerve that ran alongside that muscle. This type of injury was difficult to detect on standard tests and could cause exactly the type of pain that Maria had been experiencing. This explains everything," Dr. Mitchell said, showing Maria the MRI images. "Look here. You can see where the muscle has some scar tissue formation, and here's where the nerve is being compressed. This isn't something that will heal on its own with just rest. You need specific physical therapy and possibly a minor procedure to release the nerve compression." For the first time in months, Maria felt validated. She wasn't weak or making excuses. She had a real injury that required real treatment. Dr. Mitchell provided her with a detailed report and recommendations for treatment, including a letter explaining why Maria's physical performance had been limited. "Will I be able to return to full military training?" Maria asked, still worried about her future. "With proper treatment, I expect you to make a full recovery," Dr. Mitchell assured her. "In fact, once we address this issue, you might find that you're stronger than you were before the injury. Sometimes fixing a problem that's been limiting you can actually improve your overall performance." Maria returned to the base Sunday evening with Dr. Mitchell's report and a new sense of hope. She had concrete evidence that her injury was real and treatable. However, she also knew that convincing the military medical system to accept an outside diagnosis wouldn't be easy. Monday morning, Maria requested a meeting with the base medical officer to discuss Dr. Mitchell's findings. Captain James Thompson was the senior medical officer on base, and he was known for being skeptical of outside medical opinions. He believed that military doctors were perfectly capable of diagnosing and treating any injuries that occurred during training. Private Santos, I understand you sought treatment outside the military medical system, Captain Thompson said when Maria entered his office. His tone was formal and slightly disapproving. Yes, sir, Maria replied, standing at attention despite the pain in her leg. I have a detailed report from Dr. Mitchell that I believe explains my ongoing symptoms. Captain Thompson took the report and scanned through it quickly. Mitchell is not a military doctor and doesn't understand the unique demands placed on our personnel. Our doctors have already evaluated your condition and found nothing that would prevent you from completing your training. Maria felt her heart sink. Sir, with respect, Dr. Mitchell is a specialist in sports medicine and has experience with these types of injuries. The MRI clearly shows damage that wasn't detected in previous tests. Private Santos, questioning the competence of military medical professionals is not appropriate. However, I will have our orthopedic specialist review this report. Until then, you will continue with your regular training schedule. The meeting ended with Maria feeling frustrated but not defeated. At least Captain Thompson had agreed to have the report reviewed by a specialist. That was more progress than she had made in months. Over the next few days, word spread among the recruits that Maria had sought outside medical treatment. This led to even more ridicule from some of her peers, who saw it as proof that she was trying to get special treatment or avoid her responsibilities. Now she's doctor shopping, Private Williams told his friends. She's going to keep looking until she finds someone who tells her what she wants to hear. But there were also recruits who began to question whether they had been too harsh in their judgment of Maria. Private David Rodriguez, who was not related to Sergeant Rodriguez despite sharing the same last name, approached Maria after a training session. Santos, I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I've been thinking about what you've been going through, and I realize I haven't been very supportive. If you really are dealing with a serious injury, that takes courage to keep training through it. Maria appreciated David's words, but she was still waiting to hear from the base orthopedic specialist. Each day felt like an eternity as she continued to struggle through training exercises while waiting for validation of her condition. Finally, after a week of waiting, Captain Thompson called Maria back to his office. This time, his demeanor was different. He looked somewhat embarrassed and uncomfortable as he reviewed the paperwork on his desk. Private Santos, our orthopedic specialist, has reviewed Dr. Mitchell's report and conducted his own examination based on her recommendations. I have to tell you that her diagnosis appears to be correct. You do have a complex soft tissue injury that requires specialized treatment. Maria felt a mix of relief and vindication wash over her. Finally, the military medical system was acknowledging what she had known all along. What does this mean for my training, sir? She asked. You'll be placed on limited duty while you undergo the recommended physical therapy. Dr. Martinez, our orthopedic specialist, will work with you to develop a treatment plan based on Dr. Mitchell's recommendations. The goal is to get you back to full training capability as quickly and safely as possible. As Maria left Captain Thompson's office, she felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She finally had answers and a path forward. But she also knew that this was just the beginning of her journey back to full capability. The real test would be proving to herself and everyone else that she could overcome this setback and become the soldier she knew she could be. That evening, she called her father to share the good news. Dad, you were right. I found the answers I needed and now I can start getting better. I'm proud of you, mija, Roberto said. It takes courage to keep fighting when everyone else has given up on you. Remember this feeling, because it's going to help you through whatever challenges come next. The physical therapy program that Dr. Martinez designed for Maria was unlike anything she had experienced before. Instead of the general exercises that the base medical staff had previously recommended, this program targeted the specific muscle groups and nerve pathways that had been damaged in her injury. Physical therapist Staff Sergeant Kelly Anderson was assigned to work with Maria. Anderson was a former combat medic who had transitioned into physical therapy after sustaining her own injuries in the field. She understood both the physical and psychological challenges that soldiers faced when dealing with injuries that affected their performance. The first thing we need to do is reduce the inflammation around that compressed nerve, Anderson explained during their first session. Then we'll work on strengthening the damaged muscle tissue and restoring full range of motion. But I want to warn you, this isn't going to be easy or quick. Anderson's assessment was accurate. The therapy sessions were intense and often painful. Maria had to perform exercises that specifically targeted the injured area, which meant dealing with significant discomfort. But this pain was different from the sharp shooting pain she had been experiencing. This was the good kind of pain that indicated healing and progress. During the first week of therapy, Maria felt frustrated by how weak her leg had become. Months of compensating for the injury had caused other muscle groups to weaken, and she had lost flexibility and coordination. Simple exercises that should have been easy left her feeling exhausted and discouraged. Don't compare yourself to where you were before the injury, Anderson advised when she noticed Maria's frustration. Compare yourself to where you were yesterday. Every small improvement is a victory. Meanwhile, the other recruits continued their regular training without Maria. She watched from the sidelines as they practiced the wall climbing exercises that had once been her specialty. Some of the recruits, particularly Private Williams, made comments about how she was getting special treatment and avoiding the hard work that everyone else had to do. "It must be nice to sit around in air conditioning while the rest of us are out here sweating," Williams said one day as the other recruits headed out for a particularly challenging obstacle course training session. These comments hurt, but Maria was learning to use them as motivation, rather than allowing them to defeat her. She knew that she was working harder than anyone realized, just in a different way. The physical therapy sessions were pushing her body to its limits and requiring mental toughness that was just as demanding as any military training exercise. After 2 weeks of therapy, Maria began to notice small improvements. The sharpshooting pains that had plagued her for months were becoming less frequent. She could walk upstairs without planning each step carefully. These might have seemed like minor victories to someone who had never dealt with a serious injury, but to Maria, they represented hope that she was finally heading in the right direction. Martinez monitored her progress closely, adjusting the therapy program as her condition improved. He had initially been skeptical about her chances of returning to full military duty, but he was impressed by her dedication to the recovery process and the steady progress she was making. "Your commitment to this rehabilitation program has been exceptional," he told Maria during a checkup appointment. "I've seen a lot of soldiers go through similar injuries, and many of them don't put in the effort required to make a complete recovery. You're doing everything right." As Maria's physical condition improved, so did her mental state. For months, she had been dealing with doubt about her abilities and questions about whether she belonged in the military. The constant pain had made her question her own toughness and determination. But now, as the pain decreased and her strength returned, she began to feel like herself again. 1 month into the therapy program, Anderson decided that Maria was ready to start incorporating some military-specific exercises into her routine. These weren't the full obstacle courses that the other recruits were practicing, but they were modified versions designed to test her progress while avoiding any risk of re-injury. "Today we're going to try some basic climbing movements," Anderson announced during a therapy session. "Nothing too challenging, just enough to see how your leg responds to the type of movements you'll need for your military training." Maria felt nervous but excited as she approached the modified climbing wall that had been set up in the physical therapy facility. This wall was only about 6 feet high, much smaller than the walls used in regular training, but it represented a significant milestone in her recovery journey. She grabbed the handholds and carefully began to climb. Her left leg felt different than it had in months. Instead of the sharp pain that had always accompanied any climbing movement, she felt normal muscle fatigue. It was the difference between a scream of protest from an injured body and the manageable discomfort of muscles working hard. "How does that feel?" Anderson asked as Maria reached the top of the small wall. "It feels like my leg again," Maria replied, unable to hide the smile on her face. "It feels like it's actually part of my body, instead of something that's just along for the ride." This first successful climbing exercise marked a turning point in Maria's recovery. Over the following weeks, Anderson gradually increased the difficulty and intensity of the exercises. Maria was able to handle progressively more challenging movements without experiencing the debilitating pain that had defined her previous months. But the physical recovery was only part of Maria's journey. She also had to rebuild her confidence and overcome the psychological impact of months of failure and ridicule. Every time she attempted a new exercise, Part of her brain expected the sharp pain to return and force her to stop. Learning to trust her body again was almost as difficult as the physical rehabilitation itself. Anderson understood this psychological component of recovery and worked with Maria to develop mental strategies for dealing with the anxiety and fear that naturally accompanied her return to military-style training. "Your brain is trying to protect you by anticipating pain that's no longer there," Anderson explained. "We need to retrain your mind just like we've retrained your muscles. That takes time and practice." During this period, Maria's relationship with the other recruits began to change. Some of them, particularly those who had been most critical of her struggles, continued to view her with suspicion. They saw her extended time in physical therapy as evidence that she wasn't tough enough for military service. But others began to recognize the dedication and hard work that Maria was putting into her recovery. Private David Rodriguez, who had apologized to Maria earlier, started visiting her during therapy sessions to offer encouragement and support. "I've been watching what you're doing in here," he told her one afternoon. "The exercises you're doing look harder than anything we're doing in regular training. You're not getting special treatment. You're doing extra work." Lisa Chen remained Maria's strongest supporter throughout the recovery process. She often helped Maria with stretching and mobility exercises in their dormitory room, and she served as a sounding board when Maria felt frustrated or discouraged. "You're going to come back from this stronger than you were before," Lisa told her. "I can already see the difference in how you carry yourself. You're more determined and focused than anyone else in our unit."
2 months into the therapy program, Dr.
Martinez conducted a comprehensive evaluation to assess Maria's progress. The tests included strength measurements, flexibility assessments, and functional movement screenings. The results exceeded everyone's expectations, including Maria's own. "Your injured leg is now actually stronger than your uninjured leg," Dr. Martinez announced with satisfaction. "The targeted strengthening we've been doing has not only fixed the original problem, but has actually improved your overall physical capability. More importantly, the nerve compression that had been causing the sharp shooting pains was completely resolved. The MRI showed that the inflammation had decreased significantly, and the nerve was no longer being impinged by the surrounding tissues." "Does this mean I can return to full training?" Maria asked, hardly daring to hope. "I think you're ready to start transitioning back to modified military training, Dr. Firsthand," Martinez replied. "We'll work with your drill instructors to gradually increase your activity level while monitoring how your body responds." The news that Maria would be returning to training spread quickly through the recruit barracks. Reactions were mixed, with some recruits expressing genuine happiness for her progress, while others remained skeptical about whether she would be able to handle the demands of military life. Sergeant Rodriguez was cautiously optimistic about Maria's return. He had seen other recruits come back from injuries, and he knew that the transition from physical therapy to full training could be challenging. He was willing to give Maria another chance, but he also made it clear that she would need to prove herself all over again. "Santos, I'm glad to hear that you're feeling better," he told her when she reported back to his unit. "But understand that you're starting over. You'll need to demonstrate that you can handle everything we throw at you, and you'll need to do it without any special accommodations." Maria accepted these terms without hesitation. She understood that she would need to prove herself not only to Sergeant Rodriguez, but also to her fellow recruits and, most importantly, to herself. The months of struggle and recovery had taught her valuable lessons about persistence and determination, but now she needed to apply those lessons in the demanding environment of military training. As she prepared for her return to full training, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The injury that had seemed like it might end her military career had actually taught her things about herself that she might never have discovered otherwise. She had learned that true strength wasn't just about physical capability, but also about mental resilience and the willingness to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. The real test was still ahead of her. Soon, she would once again face the climbing walls and obstacle courses that had become symbols of her struggle and failure. But this time she would face them with a stronger body, a more determined mind, and the knowledge that she had already overcome challenges that would have defeated many others. The stage was set for Maria to prove that her months of hard work and dedication had been worth it. Tomorrow, she would return to the training ground where her journey had begun, ready to show everyone, including herself, what she was truly capable of achieving. Maria's first day back at full training arrived with a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks, but nothing could completely eliminate the anxiety she felt about returning to the environment where she had experienced so much failure and humiliation. The morning began with the usual physical training routine. As Maria joined her fellow recruits for morning calisthenics, she could feel their eyes on her, watching to see if she would be able to keep up or if she would once again become the weak link in their unit. The exercises started with basic movements like jumping jacks, push-ups, and sit-ups. Maria felt strong and confident as she performed these familiar exercises. Her body moved the way it was supposed to move, without the constant pain that had been her companion for so many months. But she knew that the real test would come when they reached the obstacle course training that was scheduled for later in the morning. Private Williams watched Maria carefully during the warm-up exercises, looking for any sign of weakness or hesitation. He had been one of her harshest critics during her struggle with the injury, and he wasn't ready to accept that she had truly recovered. "She looks fine now," he whispered to another recruit, "but let's see how she does when things get difficult. I bet she'll start limping again as soon as she has to do any real work." Sergeant Rodriguez was also watching Maria closely, but his observations were more professional and less judgmental. He could see that her movements were fluid and confident in a way they hadn't been for months, but he also knew that confidence during basic exercises didn't necessarily translate to success with more challenging activities. When the time came for obstacle course training, the recruits assembled at the same training ground where Maria had experienced so many failures. The sight of the climbing walls and other obstacles brought back memories of pain, frustration, and embarrassment. But Maria forced herself to focus on the present moment rather than dwelling on past difficulties. "Today we're going to run the complete obstacle course," Sergeant Rodriguez announced. "This is a timed exercise, and your performance will be recorded for your permanent training file. Santos, since you've been away from this type of training for several weeks, you'll go first so I can assess your current capability level." Being called to go first was both an opportunity and a challenge. Maria would be able to demonstrate her recovery without having to worry about comparing her performance to others, but she would also be performing under the intense scrutiny of everyone present. The obstacle course consisted of several components: a series of hurdles, a rope climbing section, a wall climb, and a final sprint to the finish line. The wall climb had been Maria's biggest challenge during her injury, so it would serve as the ultimate test of her recovery. Maria took her position at the starting line and waited for Sergeant Rodriguez's signal. Her heart was beating fast, but it was the good kind of nervous energy that came from excitement rather than fear. For the first time in months, she felt confident that her body would respond the way she needed it to. "Go!" Sergeant Rodriguez shouted, and Maria exploded into motion. The first section of hurdles felt effortless. Her legs moved with power and coordination that had been missing during her injury. She cleared each hurdle cleanly and efficiently, building momentum as she moved through the course. The rope climbing section had always been one of Maria's strengths before her injury. As she approached the rope, she felt a brief moment of doubt. This was where everything had started to go wrong months ago, but she pushed that thought aside and grabbed the rope with determination. Her ascent was smooth and powerful. The muscles in her arms and legs worked together perfectly, propelling her up the rope faster than she had climbed in months. When she reached the top and rang the bell, she felt a surge of confidence that carried her into the final section of the course. Now came the moment that would truly test her recovery. The 12-foot wall loomed ahead of her, the same wall that had defeated her so many times during her injury. This was where she had experienced her most humiliating failures, where she had been forced to drop back to the ground in pain while other recruits laughed at her struggles. As Maria approached the wall, she could hear the conversation stop among the watching recruits. Everyone was focused on this moment, wondering if she would succeed or if the old problems would resurface under pressure. Maria didn't hesitate. She leaped up and grabbed the top edge of the wall with both hands. Her feet found purchase on the wall surface, and she began to pull herself up with fluid, powerful movements. Her left leg, which had been the source of so much pain and limitation, now felt strong and responsive. But then, something unexpected happened. As Maria reached the halfway point of the wall climb, she heard a familiar voice from below. "Come on, Santos! Show them what you're made of." It was Private David Rodriguez, the recruit who had apologized to her and offered encouragement during her recovery. His words of support gave her an extra boost of energy and determination. Maria continued climbing with increasing confidence and speed. Instead of struggling to reach the top of the wall, she found herself moving faster than she had ever moved before. The months of targeted physical therapy had not only fixed her injury, but had actually made her stronger than she had been originally. As she reached the top of the wall and prepared to drop down the other side, Maria could see the surprised expressions on the faces of the recruits below. She had not only successfully completed the wall climb, she had done it with a speed and efficiency that impressed even Sergeant Rodriguez. The final sprint to the finish line was pure joy for Maria. Her legs carried her forward with power and coordination that felt almost effortless after months of pain and struggle. When she crossed the finish line, she looked back at Sergeant Rodriguez for her time. "Santos, that was outstanding," Sergeant Rodriguez said, consulting his stopwatch. "Not only did you complete the course successfully, but your time was better than most of your fellow recruits have achieved all year." The other recruits stood in stunned silence for a moment, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Private Williams, who had been Maria's harshest critic, looked particularly shocked. He had expected to see the same struggling, limping recruit who had been unable to complete basic exercises. Instead, he had watched someone perform at a level that exceeded his own capabilities. Maria felt a mixture of relief, pride, and vindication wash over her. She had proven to herself and everyone else that her injury was real, that her recovery was complete, and that she belonged in this military training program. But more than that, she had demonstrated a level of mental toughness and determination that would serve her well throughout her military career. Over the next several days, word spread throughout the base about Maria's remarkable performance. Recruits and instructors who had heard about her struggles during the injury were impressed by her comeback. Some of them approached her to offer congratulations and to ask about her recovery process. The dynamic within her own recruit unit began to change significantly. Private Williams, faced with undeniable evidence of Maria's capability, was forced to reconsider his previous judgments about her character and toughness. While he didn't apologize directly, he stopped making disparaging comments and began treating her with the respect that her performance had earned. Other recruits who had remained neutral during Maria's struggles now looked at her with new admiration. They recognized that her journey back from injury had required a type of courage and persistence that was different from, but just as valuable as, the physical bravery that military training typically emphasized. Lisa Chen was thrilled by her friend's success. "I knew you had it in you all along," she told Maria. "But I have to admit, even I'm surprised by how strong you've become. You're like a completely different person, but also exactly who you were always meant to be." Sergeant Rodriguez was particularly impressed by Maria's transformation. He had seen many recruits overcome injuries and setbacks, but he had rarely witnessed such a dramatic improvement in both physical capability and mental resilience. "Santos, I owe you an apology," he told her privately after another successful training session. "I questioned your commitment and your toughness when I should have been looking for ways to help you solve the problem you were facing. You've shown me something about perseverance that I won't forget." But perhaps the most meaningful validation came when Maria called her father to share the news of her success. Roberto Santos had been her source of inspiration and support throughout the darkest periods of her struggle, and she wanted him to know that his advice and encouragement had made all the difference. "Dad, I did it," she told him, unable to keep the excitement out of her voice. "Not only did I complete the obstacle course, but I set one of the best times in my entire unit." "I never doubted you would, mija," Roberto replied, and Maria could hear the pride and emotion in his voice. "You've learned something that many soldiers never learn. You've learned that real strength comes from within, and that sometimes the biggest battles we fight are with ourselves." As the weeks passed, Maria continued to excel in her training. Her performance on the obstacle courses became consistently outstanding, and she began to emerge as one of the top recruits in her unit. But more importantly, she had developed a confidence and mental toughness that went far beyond physical capability. The injury that had once threatened to end her military career had actually become the foundation for a level of personal growth and resilience that she might never have achieved otherwise. She had learned that setbacks were not permanent defeats, but opportunities to develop new strengths and capabilities. Maria's story began to serve as inspiration for other recruits who were facing their own challenges and setbacks. Instructors would point to her example when working with soldiers who were struggling with injuries, confidence issues, or other obstacles that seemed insurmountable. 3 months after her return to full training, Maria graduated from basic training with honors. She had not only overcome her injury, but had become one of the most respected and capable recruits in her class. The wall that had once been a symbol of her limitation had become a symbol of her triumph over adversity. As she prepared to move on to advanced military training, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about the dark days when she had questioned whether she had what it took to be a soldier. She remembered the pain, both physical and emotional, that had nearly broken her spirit. But she also remembered the moment when she decided that giving up was not an option. The mockery and doubt that she had faced from others had been painful, but it had also served as fuel for her determination to prove them wrong. In the end, the most important victory had not been over the skeptics or the physical challenges, but over her own doubts and fears. Maria Santos had climbed more than just a wall. She had climbed over every obstacle that life had placed in her path, and in doing so, she had discovered depths of strength and character that she never knew she possessed. Her journey from injured recruit to honored graduate was a testament to the power of persistence, proper medical care, and an unshakable belief in oneself. The wall that had once defeated her would never defeat her again. More importantly, she now knew that no wall ever would.